My name is Grace. I'm 24 years old and just graduated with a degree in business communications from a small college in Pennsylvania. If you had asked me 3 years ago whether I'd end up moving back into my parents' old beige house in the suburbs of Pittsburgh after graduation, I would have laughed out loud. But life has a funny way of reminding you that not everything goes according to plan. I returned to my family's familiar beige house on a gloomy April afternoon, gripping the handle of my worn-out suitcase. In my mind, I kept telling myself this was only temporary. 3 months, maybe 4 at most, and I'd save up enough for a deposit on a small apartment near downtown. I had already pictured it in my mind. Big windows filled with sunlight, a cozy kitchen, and quiet evenings with just me and a cup of hot tea. Thankfully, the job hunt didn't drag out like I feared. Within 2 weeks, I received an offer from Madison & Cole, a fast-growing marketing firm in downtown Pittsburgh. The starting salary wasn't sky-high, but it was good enough to make me feel secure. Plus, the quarterly performance bonuses sounded promising. If I did well, I could reach my goal of financial independence even faster. That night, I sat at the dinner table with my parents, my heart full of excitement. Mom was serving tomato meatballs, and Dad was flipping through an old newspaper. I couldn't hold it in any longer, so I announced happily, "I got the job at Madison & Cole. Good salary, and there are quarterly bonuses, too." The clinking of forks and knives stopped immediately. Before I even realized the shift in the air, Mom put down her fork, her eyes serious. "Are you planning to move out?" she asked, her voice calm but cold. I froze, the smile fading from my lips. "Yeah? Probably in 3 or 4 months. I want to save a little more first and then rent my own place." My parents exchanged a look, that all-too-familiar look that never meant anything good. Dad cleared his throat and started the same old speech. "Grace, your mother can only work part-time at the library because of her bad back, and me," he hesitated. "There are rumors about layoffs at the plant." Mom chimed in, her voice dropping as if she were sharing something tragic. "We really need your help with the household expenses. Staying here rent-free would be easier for your job, too. It just makes more sense, don't you think?" I looked down at the cooling meatballs on my plate, a heavy feeling settling in my chest. They weren't wrong. But another part of me, the part that longed for freedom, screamed in protest. In the end, I nodded and forced a smile. "I guess I can stay a little longer." And just like that, my new life began. I woke up early for work, contributed to the utility bills at night, and had dinner with my parents. At first, it seemed fine. I kept telling myself I was doing the right thing, helping my family for a little while, and soon I'd have my own place. I kept convincing myself that it was just temporary, that 3 months would fly by. But when the 4th month rolled around, I started realizing something was very wrong. One Friday evening, after a long, exhausting day of working on a new client campaign, I walked through the door only to find Mom waiting for me in the living room. A large envelope sat on the table in front of her, like it had been waiting all day. I hadn't even taken off my shoes when she spoke, her voice soft but colder than the winter wind outside. "Grace, your father and I did some calculations. With your current salary, you can afford to contribute more to the household expenses." I blinked, feeling a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean?" Dad walked out from the kitchen holding a water bill, his voice dropping. "Electricity, water, internet? Everything's going up. We can't keep covering it all by ourselves." I gripped the strap of my bag tighter. So, the no-rent promise had been just sweet talk in the beginning. Now that I was getting settled in my job, they had everything lined up to make me pay more. "I already buy groceries every week," I said, trying to stay calm. "And I've been paying the electric bill since last month, too." Mom shook her head, giving me a sad little smile. "That's just a small part, Grace. At this point, we really need you to contribute a fixed amount every month. Think of it as sharing the family responsibility." I tightened my grip on my bag, my heart sinking. Every time I thought I was making progress, it felt like another invisible chain pulled me back. I only plan to stay for a few months, I reminded them, my voice cracking. I'm saving to move out. Dad crossed his arms, his expression hardening. Saving is good, but family is family. You can't turn your back when we need you. The phrase, family is family, echoed in my head like a sad, endless song. I nodded quietly, too drained to argue, and hurried upstairs, swallowing the lump in my throat. The days that followed felt like living under a thin layer of pressure seeping into everything. Dinner wasn't light conversations anymore. It was a steady stream of subtle reminders about rising gas bills, roof repairs, and new expenses. This winter's really harsh, Mom would comment while holding the heating bill. If someone could chip in a little more, it would make things so much easier. I ate my cold soup in silence, bitterness rising inside me. One Saturday afternoon, while I was at my desk working on Madison and Cole's quarterly report, Mom knocked and entered with a stack of family health insurance papers. She smiled sweetly, but her words were razor-sharp. Grace, we were thinking you could help with a small part of the insurance premiums. You know, health is everything. I looked up at her like I was seeing a stranger. Mom, I don't even have my own insurance yet. You're young and healthy, you'll be fine, she cut me off, her voice breezy as if me carrying the entire family was perfectly natural. That night, lying in my old room, listening to the wind howl outside, I wondered when exactly I had turned into the family's walking wallet. My original plan, save for 3 months and move out, now felt as fragile as smoke, easily blown away by guilt trips, suggestive glances, and sharp words disguised as concern. I realized that if I stayed in this house, I would never be allowed to leave. I closed my eyes, the weight of an unformed decision heavy in my chest. But deep down, a tiny flame flickered. I knew I couldn't stay like this forever. I hadn't even mapped out my next move yet when, one Sunday afternoon, the front door swung open, and with the cold October breeze came my sister. Lauren. Lauren, 8 years older than me, was married to a man named Craig and had 2 young kids, Ella, who was 5, and Mason, who was 3. She had lived 2 states away, but today she showed up unexpectedly with her whole family, laughter echoing through the hallway. Ian went for the gases and Grace leaned back in differential music. Travis and Craig, this is actually... There are so many guys here, crowding me. Aden, Mason, it's been so long. She rushed over, hugging and fussing over the kids like they were the most adorable beings on earth. I stood at the kitchen doorway, a glass of water in my hand, quietly observing. A part of me was already used to this, the way Mom lit up at the sight of Lauren, the way Dad abandoned his favorite sports broadcast to greet Craig at the door, the way the entire house seemed truly alive only when Lauren was around. Grace, could you grab another glass for Craig? Mom said sweetly without even glancing at me. I set my water glass down and silently fetched another one, like a shadow moving through the room. That night, I learned something new. It didn't matter that I was grown, that I had graduated with honors, or that I was shouldering a large part of the household expenses. In my parents' eyes, I would always be the background to Lauren's spotlight. Throughout dinner, every conversation revolved around her. Mom couldn't stop asking about the new house Lauren and Craig had just bought, the private school they were considering for Ella, or the luxury Christmas vacation they were planning. Has Ella learned to read yet? My mom asked, her eyes sparkling with pride. She's already reading children's books, Mom, Lauren beamed. And Mason is learning how to swim. He's doing great. That's wonderful, Mom exclaimed, turning to my dad, her face full of pride. Our daughter really is the best. No one asked me about my job at Madison and Cole. No one asked about the campaigns I had won, the nights I stayed up to meet deadlines. No one cared that I was trying, that I was building a life of my own. I cut my meatball into small pieces, chewing silently, barely tasting anything. After dinner, while I was washing dishes, Lauren casually appeared behind me, leaning against the kitchen counter. sipping a glass of white wine. "You're still living here?" she chuckled, as if it was the most bizarre thing. "Yeah," I replied shortly, scrubbing a plate under the hot water. "You know," she sang, "living with your parents at this age is a little weird." I turned and looked straight into her pale blue eyes. "The same as Mom's." "I'm here to help them pay the bills," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Lauren shrugged and took another sip. "Well, someone had to do it. Lucky for them, they have you." Her smile was light, but every word felt like a needle picking my chest. That night, sitting in my room, listening to Lauren and Craig laughing in the living room, I didn't even feel sad anymore. Just a cold numbness. I was never the first choice. I had never even been a choice. In this house, I was nothing more than the backup, the unpaid help, the placeholder when Lauren's spotlight dimmed even slightly. A thought crept into my mind, clearer than ever. If I didn't save myself, no one would. Everything changed quickly. Just 2 weeks after Lauren and Craig temporarily moved in with my parents, claiming their new house was under renovation. I still remember that afternoon vividly, dragging myself up the porch steps after a long day at work, only to see their SUV parked out front, and hear the loud shrieks of the kids from the yard. Mom, her face lit up like I'd never seen, greeted me at the door. "Grace, thank goodness you're home." Ella and Mason are full of energy. "Your father and I can't keep up." I hadn't even taken off my coat when Mason crashed into my legs, hands sticky with chocolate, and Ella ran circles around the sofa with a marker in her hand. Lauren poked her head out from the kitchen, her golden hair tied up high, her face bright and carefree. "Sweetheart, perfect timing. We were thinking of grabbing dinner out. You don't mind watching the kids for a few hours, do you?" I opened my mouth to protest, but Mom was quicker, her voice sweet as syrup. "You know your father and I aren't as spry anymore, Grace. You're the only one fast enough to keep up with them." I looked around at the messy house, toys scattered everywhere, new stains on the carpet, and swallowed the lump in my throat. "Just a few hours," I muttered, convincing myself. But a few hours was never just a few hours. Dinner turned into drinks with friends, then coffee, then a late movie. That night, I stayed up until nearly midnight, coaxing Mason to sleep, while Ella lay crying for her mom. The next day, when I tried to sit down with my parents to share how overwhelmed I felt, all I got were dismissive looks. "My back was killing me all night," Dad groaned, rubbing his hip. "I can't chase after the little ones anymore." Mom sighed sympathetically, mostly for herself. "And I had a headache all morning. Grace, only someone young and strong like you can handle them." And so, an unspoken agreement was made. Grace was the default babysitter. I worked from 8 to 5, came home exhausted, and immediately became the unpaid nanny. On weekends, when my friends went on trips, attended festivals, or simply slept in, I juggled Mason's meals, Ella's coloring sessions, cleaning up the house before my parents' unannounced gatherings. Once, I dared to ask for a weekend off, only to be met with a stunned look, as if I had just committed a grave offense. "You can't just think about yourself, Grace," Mom said, her voice heavy with guilt. "Lauren and Craig need some time together. The kids are little. Who else will care for them if not you?" I stayed silent. In this house, every argument revolved around one thing: everyone else's needs. Mine simply didn't exist. Worse yet, Lauren began to treat my presence as a given. Every time I walked through the door after work, she was there, waving a list of tasks: feed Mason, help Ella with preschool assignments, fold laundry, clean up toys. "We've got date night," Lauren said once, applying lipstick in front of the living room mirror while I bounced a crying Mason on my hip. "Someday, you'll get it. This is good real-world experience for you." I clenched my jaw, feeling like I was being shackled to a life that wasn't mine. Every day, I felt myself sinking further, losing little pieces of myself. And deep down, a voice kept growing louder. It's time to change, Grace. If you don't stand up, no one will. The news came on a cold Tuesday evening as I walked through the door. Lauren sat at the kitchen table, clutching her phone, her face tense. Craig was pacing the living room, his hands running through his messy brown hair. Before I could ask what was happening, Mom appeared, her voice choked as if she had just been hit with a blow. Grace, we need to talk. I unwrapped my scarf, my stomach dropping. Craig just got notice, Mom said quickly, wringing her hands. His company went bankrupt. Lauren's family lost their main income. I looked at Lauren. She sat with her head bowed, her shoulders shaking slightly, one hand covering her face. I knew she was my sister, but I couldn't stop the unease curling inside me. So what's the plan now? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom glanced at Dad, then back at me, her eyes full of desperate hope. We're thinking they should move in here, just temporarily, until they get back on their feet. I froze. Our 4-bedroom house already felt cramped. And now 4 more people? And the non-stop chaos of 2 small children? What about my room? I asked, my throat tightening. Mom didn't answer right away. Dad cleared his throat and said, "We've discussed it. Ella and Mason need a safe space to play and feel secure. We think you should give up your room." I swallowed hard. "And me?" "You can move into the storage room," Mom said quickly, as if saying it fast would make it sound less insane. "Just for a little while, Grace. You're young. You'll adjust." I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. The storage room? That tiny space, barely big enough for a twin bed and a tiny desk? The place that had always been piled high with old Christmas decorations and boxes of newspapers Dad couldn't throw away? I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask why my needs were always the first to be sacrificed. But instead, I just nodded stiffly and went upstairs, feeling like someone had snatched away my life yet again. That weekend, I cleaned out the storage room. Every time I hauled another box away, a part of me went numb. My bedroom, my sanctuary for years, was repainted in soft pastels, carpeted, and filled with toys. The day Lauren and Craig officially moved in, the house turned into a chaotic beehive. Ella and Mason ran wild, shouting through the hallways. Lauren directed the furniture like a queen orchestrating her court, while Craig fumbled with Mason's crib in the dining room. Mom couldn't stop gushing over the kids. Dad brewed coffee for Craig like he was some kind of honored guest. And me? I vanished into my new room, struggling to hold back the sighs as I rebuilt my flimsy twin bed. That night, after things calmed down, I went to the kitchen, looking for something to eat. There was a plate of cold cookies on the table, and the living room echoed with the sounds of a cartoon Ella was watching. Mom caught sight of me and said quickly, "Grace, can you watch Ella and Mason tomorrow? Lauren and Craig have some paperwork to take care of." I froze. "I have work," I reminded her, my voice raspy. "Just in the evening," she said, already clearing plates. "Just a few hours. You're young, you can handle it." I barely remember how I made it back to my tiny room that night. All I know is that as I lay there, listening to Ella's laughter, Craig's loud phone conversations, and Mom softly reassuring Lauren that everything will be okay, I realized I had nothing left but this cramped space and a loneliness that seemed to fill every breath. It didn't take long to understand that Lauren and Craig moving in was just the beginning of a real nightmare. My days now started with Mason screaming at 6 in the morning. Ella pounded on my door every chance she got. I hadn't even opened my eyes before the house thundered with footsteps, clattering toys and blaring cartoons. Hiding in my tiny room before work barely bought me 10 minutes of peace. Mason would often sneak in, smearing crayon marks or cookie crumbs all over my paperwork. Once, I spent an entire night scraping crayon stains off a client contract due the next morning. Lauren and Craig lived like they were on vacation. Lauren spent most of her time scrolling through social media or chatting with friends. Craig parked himself at the kitchen table, claiming to job hunt, but mostly playing games. My parents? They were thrilled with the chaos. Whenever I mentioned the noise or the mess, Mom would chuckle. "They're just kids. Let them be free." Dad would nod along, like the noise and disorder were proof of a happy family. After work, I dragged myself home, only to be thrown into the same endless cycle. Babysitting, cooking, cleaning. Dinner became a frantic juggle. Cutting Mason's food, mopping up Ella's spilled juice, forcing down my own cold leftovers. Or still, the bills started skyrocketing. The first time I looked at the new electric bill, I had to reread it 3 times. It was nearly double what it had been, and it all fell on me, because Lauren and Craig weren't financially stable, and my parents lived on limited pensions. When I brought it up one Thursday night at dinner, my hands shook despite trying to stay calm. "We need to talk about the bills," I said, laying the electric bill on the table. "I can't keep covering everything by myself." Lauren looked up from her phone, frowning. "Grace, bringing up money right now is really insensitive." Mom immediately chimed in, her voice full of reproach. "You know Lauren and Craig are struggling. Family is supposed to support each other, not nickel and dime everything." I clenched my fists under the table, my chest tight. "And who's supporting me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I'm working full-time too. I need to save for my own future." Craig snorted, muttering, "What future does a single girl even need to save for?" Later that year, it felt like a slap to the face. I stood up, my chair screeching against the floor. "I get it," I said coldly, gathering the bill into my hands. "I'll handle my part. The rest, figure it out yourselves." I turned and walked back toward the storage room. The sound of laughter and murmured comments behind me like 1,000 tiny knives. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake on the small bed, listening to footsteps running wild down the hallway, the late-night TV blaring downstairs, and my mother murmuring about how Lauren handles family pressure so well. In the darkness, one thought blazed clearly in my mind. I couldn't keep living like this. If I stayed any longer, I would lose whatever was left of myself. For the first time in months, I sat up, opened my laptop, and started searching for apartments. I didn't know where I was going yet, but one thing was certain. I was leaving, and this time, I wasn't looking back. Saturday morning, just as I finished making my coffee, Mom appeared in the kitchen, holding a thick stack of bills. She dropped it on the table with a heavy thud, as if she wanted the whole world to hear. "Grace, we need to talk about the electricity, water, internet, and grocery bills," she began, her expression serious. I set my coffee down, my heart sinking. I knew this conversation wouldn't end well. "Everything's gotten more expensive," Mom continued, her voice tinged with reproach. "There are more people living here now. Of course, expenses are higher." I nodded, trying to stay calm. "That's why I suggested," I said slowly, "that everyone should share the living costs fairly, each family a portion and me a portion. That way, it's easier for everyone." The kitchen fell into sudden silence. Lauren came down the stairs, her hair neat, her face fresh, as if nothing was wrong. Overhearing the conversation, she let out a dry laugh that sent chills down my spine. "Oh, Grace," Lauren said, her voice sugary sweet but dripping with sarcasm. "Are you really going to nickel and dime your own family?" Craig called out from the living room, throwing in another jab that made my blood boil. "We're struggling right now, and you still have the heart to bring this up?" Dad shook his head and sighed like I was the most ungrateful child in America. "Family means sacrifice, Grace. You can't always think about dollars and cents." Mom delivered the final blow, her voice firm as a gavel. "If you're not willing to help when the family's struggling, what kind of family member are you?" I bit my lip hard, swallowing all the arguments stuck in my throat. Any reason I gave would just be crushed under the ungrateful label they were eager to slap on me. I turned away, feeling my heart being squeezed tight. The coffee in my hand had gone cold, just like the numbness spreading through me. From that day on, my resentment wasn't just a quiet simmer anymore. It became a storm, growing bigger and stronger every day. Lauren and Craig kept using me as their free weekend nanny. Every Friday afternoon, I'd get a text from Lauren. Something like, "Craig and I have plans tomorrow night. You'll watch Ella and Mason, right? Thanks, love." As if it was a given, not even worth asking. My parents kept using their health as an excuse anytime I hinted that maybe they should help. Dad's got a headache. Ari's mom's back is acting up. We're getting old, Grace. The same broken record over and over. Meanwhile, I was stuck in a never-ending loop. Work, pay bills, babysit, clean, collect. One time, I dared to say no. A simple text. "I'm busy this weekend, can't babysit." Within minutes, my phone blew up with missed calls and guilt trip messages from Mom, Dad, and Lauren, all with the same accusatory tone. "You're letting the family down. Your sister has been through so much. Only selfish people turn their backs on family in tough times." Every word felt like a dagger in my pride. But this time, instead of feeling guilty, I just felt empty. Sunday night, as I cleaned up toys scattered across the living room, Lauren strolled in with a smoothie in hand. "Craig and I are going to look at model homes tomorrow morning," she said casually. "So you'll need to watch the kids again." I froze, looking at her, feeling nothing but ice inside. "You do realize," I said, my words sharp as stone, "that I have a life too?" Lauren shrugged and smiled coldly. "Oh, Grace, you live with your parents and work a desk job. What could you possibly be so busy with?" I stood up straight, staring directly into her eyes. For the first time in months, I felt no fear. No hesitation. "Just wait," I said softly. "You'll find out soon enough." I turned and walked away, leaving behind Lauren's annoyed, confused face. Inside me, a plan was forming. And this time, I swore no one was going to crush my dreams again. I sat, curled up in the cramped storage room, the dim light from an old desk lamp casting uneven shadows on the walls. In my hands was a text from Rachel, my best friend from college. "Grace, we're planning a ski trip to Blue Ridge Mountain this weekend. Come with us. You need a break from that madhouse." I stared at the screen, torn. Part of me wanted to say no, like always, claim I was too busy, had family obligations, or just fear. But this time, a fierce need flooded through me. I had to get out. I had to breathe. I had to remind myself that another life existed beyond this endless cycle of bills, babysitting, and cleaning. I typed back, "I'm in. Save me a spot." Just then, I heard a knock at the door. Lauren peeked in, her perfect golden hair tied up neatly, her smile bright like she had never known hardship. "Grace," she sang. "Craig and I got invited to Uncle Gene's birthday party downtown this Saturday. Mom and Dad are coming too. You'll watch Ella and Mason, right?" I looked up, my voice calmer than even I expected. "Sorry, I won't be home this weekend." Lauren frowned, not understanding. "Why? I'm going skiing with my friends," I repeated, emphasizing every word. The air in the room seemed to freeze. "You're kidding," Lauren barked a sharp laugh. "Grace, this is a family thing." "No, I'm not kidding," I said, standing up, feeling a new strength rush through me. "I have a right to live my own life. I'm not your free babysitter anymore." Within minutes, shouting echoed downstairs. "Craig, Mom, Dad," all chiming in, a chaotic choir of outrage. "You're abandoning your family for a ski trip, Grace?" Mom shrieked. "I can't believe how irresponsible you're being," Dad growled. "We trusted you, and you betrayed that trust," Craig chimed in, as if he had the most right to speak. With her squeezed, Lauren pointed her finger straight at me, her voice shaking with anger. "If you walk out of this house this weekend, don't ever come back." Her words hit me like a hammer to the chest. But instead of collapsing like they expected, I simply smiled. The first truly free smile I had in months. "Don't worry," I said coldly. "I'm leaving, and I have no intention of coming back." They stood frozen. as if they couldn't believe what they just heard. But I didn't give them a chance to react. I turned, went upstairs, and started packing. Not much, just a few sets of clothes, my laptop, personal documents. The rest? I was ready to leave behind without a second thought. I heard my mother's wailing from downstairs, my father shouting, Lauren's furious voice, all swirling together like a storm behind me. But I didn't look back. Not once. Just a few hours later, I was behind the wheel of my old car, driving straight out of the street I had grown up on, leaving behind the suffocating walls and the people who only knew how to demand but never how to understand. That night, I slept on Rachel's small couch, in a cozy apartment filled with laughter. For the first time in a very long time, I could breathe air that wasn't heavy with resentment or expectations. The next morning, I woke up on Rachel's couch, weak winter sunlight filtering through the curtains. In my mind was a strange sense of relief, a feeling I had forgotten for months. Rachel handed me a hot cup of coffee. "Grace, are you sure?" she asked, her eyes full of worry and pride. I smiled, more certain than ever. "I'm sure." That very afternoon, I went back to the old house, not to apologize, not to negotiate, but to end it all. The whole family seemed to be waiting. Mom sat in the living room, her face cold as ice. Dad had his arms crossed, disappointment plain on his face. Lauren stood next to Craig, lips pressed tight, while the kids played with toys on the floor, blissfully unaware of the storm about to hit. I took a deep breath and stepped into the center of the room. "I'm here to pick up the rest of my things," I said calmly. "And to let you know, starting today, I no longer live here. I'm not paying any more living expenses either." The air grew thick, as if the room had been drained of oxygen. Mom jumped up, her face pale. "Lee, Grace, you can't do this. Families don't abandon each other." I looked straight into her eyes, unblinking. "No, Mom. Real families don't exploit each other like this." Dad slammed his hand on the armrest, his voice booming. "You're only thinking about yourself." I swallowed the anger rising inside me and replied with a strange calmness. "I've been thinking about everyone else for years. Now it's time to think about myself." Lauren scoffed, crossing her arms. "Wait until you need help. Don't expect any of us to be there for you." I turned to her, the smile on my lips free of bitterness. I don't need a family that only knows how to demand but never once asks if I'm okay. No one said a word as I quietly went upstairs and gathered the last of my belongings. One small suitcase, a few favorite books, my laptop, and my favorite coat. That was it. Everything else, the half-hearted gifts, the bitter memories, I left behind without regret. As I dragged my suitcase down the stairs, Mom rushed toward me, grabbing my arm, desperation in her eyes. "Grace, please think it over. You'll regret this." I gently freed my arm from her grip and whispered, "No, Mom. I'd regret staying." I opened the door. The biting January air slapped my face, waking every nerve in my body. I pulled my suitcase across the threshold, stepping outside, letting the old wooden door close behind me like the final period on a long, painful chapter. Driving back to Rachel's small apartment, my phone buzzed nonstop with calls and texts. I didn't even need to read them to know what they said. Rachel welcomed me with a warm smile and a tight hug. "Welcome back to the world where people love themselves," she whispered. That night, sitting on the tiny balcony, wrapped in a fluffy blanket, sipping hot cocoa, I felt truly alive, for the first time in years. No more accusations. No more crushing pressure. Just sweet, peaceful silence. Like a winter night without wind. 3 days later, I signed the lease for my very first apartment. A small, bright place just 15 minutes from work. It wasn't perfect. The walls had a few cracks, the floors were old, and the heater made a low humming noise. But to me, it felt like an entire kingdom of freedom. I laid fresh sheets on the bed, stacked my books on a shelf, hung a landscape photo on the wall, and when I finished, I stood in the center of the room, overwhelmed with indescribable joy. This was where I would start again. The first few days in my new apartment felt like a dream I once thought I could never have. Every morning, I woke up to sunlight pouring into my room, made myself a hot coffee, and sat in the armchair by the window, soaking in the absolute peace. No crying kids. No blaring TV. No one calling my name with endless demands. Just me, my little space, and complete tranquility. My bank account began to change too. No more covering electricity, water, and internet bills for an entire household. My paycheck was now enough for rent, personal expenses, and even savings. For the first time in years, I could afford little luxuries. A new book, a dinner at my favorite Italian restaurant, a weekend trip to the beach. I signed up for a yoga class nearby, made new friends, and slowly built a life I never thought I could have. A life not suffocated by expectations and unreasonable demands. But of course, my family didn't let go easily. The first message came on a Sunday night, just as I put my feet up and got ready to watch my favorite movie. Mom texted, "Grace, your father and I need to talk. The family can't stay divided like this. Then Warren, do you know the kids keep asking about you? Don't you feel guilty?" Craig wasn't far behind. "At the very least, you should be grateful to the people who raised you." The messages flooded in like a rising tide. When I didn't respond, the calls started. First Mom, then Dad, then Lauren, each taking turns. I held my phone, watching it light up and go dark again and again, feeling no guilt anymore. Instead, a cold, steady calm filled me. I was too familiar with this emotional manipulation, sweet words laced with threats, fake tears mixed with accusations. I took a deep breath, then one by one, I blocked every number. Mom, what? Dad, Lauren, Craig. Then I opened my social media accounts and cut ties with anyone who could act as a bridge for their complaints and guilt trips to find their way back to me. It wasn't easy. My hand trembled slightly as I pressed the block button. But once it was done, I sank into the chair, feeling as if I had just taken off a heavy suit of armor that had clung to me for years. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of relief. The phone was silent. No more demanding texts. No more guilt-tripping calls. I sat by the window, sipping my coffee, watching the bare trees on the street. A small smile spread across my lips. I had chosen myself, and I didn't regret it. That afternoon, after work, I stopped by a small bookstore on my way home. I bought a new notebook, soft blue leather cover, and a beautifully crafted fountain pen. That night, I sat at my desk, opened to the first page, and wrote. My new chapter begins here. I knew there would be lonely moments. There would be nights when doubt or longing crept in. But I also knew that whatever came, I would face it with a free heart. My new life gradually grew more stable day by day, and I began to learn how to listen to myself instead of the voices of others. Each morning, as sunlight streamed through the window, my heart filled with hope. I learned to savor the small things: a fragrant cup of tea, a favorite song playing while cooking, a lazy afternoon walk around the park near my apartment. These joys had once been buried under the shouts, the frowns, and the endless demands. I slowly realized that I didn't need permission to live the life I wanted. I no longer had to prove my worth by sacrificing for people who had never truly valued me. I thought back to the years I spent pushing myself, working overtime to pay bills, sacrificing precious weekends to babysit, carrying responsibilities that were never mine to begin with. All that time, I believed that if I worked hard enough, loved deep enough, I would eventually be recognized. But the truth was, my kindness only made others feel entitled. One late night, while jotting notes in my new notebook, I wrote a sentence, one word at a time, like a promise to myself. I deserved to be loved, respected, and free to choose my own life. I realized that love isn't blind sacrifice. It's not giving up yourself for scraps of affection. True love is about uplifting, sharing, and mutual respect. things I had never received in my old home. From then on, I started setting clear boundaries. I learned how to say no to unreasonable demands without feeling guilty for putting myself first. I spent time building my career, taking soft skills classes, and even signing up for a weekend cooking course, something I had never dared to do before because I was always giving my time away to others. Weekends were no longer spent staggering from exhaustion but became precious moments of true enjoyment. Short road trips, coffee dates with friends, cozy evenings reading under the warm glow of a lamp. I reconnected with old friends, the ones I had forgotten while caught up in my family's chaos. Genuine friendships, unjudged conversations, bursts of carefree laughter. They were like medicine reviving my spirit. One spring afternoon, sitting in my favorite little cafe, I realized I no longer felt any need to go back. No more longing for approval. No more waiting for an apology or a reconciliatory hug. I had found peace within myself. My family still occasionally tried to reach out, but this time I didn't feel pulled back into the old cycle of guilt and duty. I could smile calmly at their attempts, because I knew I had stepped out of that shadow for good. I chose my life, a life that was free, full, and overflowing with love. Love for myself first. My story is a powerful reminder that everyone deserves to live their own life, not to be a shadow in someone else's. When I found the courage to let go of burdens that weren't mine, I finally experienced true freedom and happiness. Life was no longer about silent sacrifices, but about building my own value and dreams. Sometimes, to find the light, you have to be brave enough to leave even the most familiar places behind. And I did it. What do you think about Grace's journey? Was she right to walk away and reclaim herself? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt and inspiring family stories. I never thought a tiny text message could change my life, but there I was, sitting in my car, waiting at a red light, staring at my phone with a silly smile on my face. On the screen was a picture of a pregnancy test with 2 clear pink lines. After nearly 3 years of waiting and hoping, I could finally become a mother. I couldn't wait any longer to share this wonderful news with my husband, Ethan. That afternoon, the gentle sunlight streamed through the car window, creating a peaceful scene. A soft song about eternal love played on the radio, a melody I usually ignored, but today it felt strangely sweet. I imagined Ethan's face when he saw the picture, his bright smile and the undeniable joy he wouldn't be able to hide. Ethan had always dreamed of having a child, and his mother, Janet, had often skillfully brought up the topic of grandchildren at every family dinner. The traffic light turned green, and I pressed the gas, my mind still immersed in dreams of our little family. But then, a loud crash shattered the tranquility. From the left, a truck barreled toward me, and the sound of metal clashing echoed in my head. The world spun around me, and everything seemed to slow down in those chaotic seconds. Amid the confusion, one thought flashed through my mind. Protect the phone. Ethan has to see this picture. When everything finally stopped moving, I couldn't feel my face. Warm liquid trickled down my neck, and somewhere far away I heard screaming. A man's voice repeated over and over, full of regret. "Oh God, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." His words drifted around me like leaves in the wind. Another voice, calmer and more reassuring, spoke close to me. "Can you hear me? Don't move." Someone held my hand gently. "Everything's going to be okay." They lied. I woke up in the hospital, the harsh white light making me squint. I realized I was lying on a bed, surrounded by the steady beeping of medical equipment. Ethan sat in a chair next to me, his head bowed, hands clenched tightly together. He looked terrible. Unshaven, his shirt wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. I tried to lift my hand to touch him, but my arm felt as heavy as lead. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice so weak I barely recognized it. He jolted awake, his green eyes wide, staring straight at me. For a brief moment, something crossed his face, something that made my stomach twist. Then he smiled. but it wasn't real. "You had me so worried," he said, taking my hand. I tried to smile back, but couldn't. My face felt stiff, as if it no longer belonged to me. "The baby," I murmured, my voice just a faint whisper. Ethan's hand tightened, a slight tremor in his grip. "I'm so sorry, Kate," he said, his voice breaking, as if he was struggling to keep his emotions in check. "The doctors did everything they could." It felt like the ground beneath me suddenly crumbled. All sounds became distant, as if I were in a sealed box, hearing only the slow, heavy thump of my heart. The hospital room door opened, and the familiar scent of Janet's expensive perfume filled the air. Her fragrance was as strong and commanding as her personality. "Ethan, the doctor needs to speak with you," she said, her voice gentle but full of control. "About the facial reconstruction options," Ethan said quickly, standing up. "I'll be right back." He let go of my hand and I closed my eyes, pretending to sleep. But their voices slipped through the barely closed door. "She's going to need a lot of surgeries." Ethan's voice softened. Her face. "Mom, I don't know if I can—" "Stay calm, sweetheart," Janet cut in. "We'll handle this, one step at a time." Tears slid down my bandaged face. They were out there, talking about me as if I were a project to fix, a problem to solve. In that moment, something inside me broke. The warmth and hope I once held began to fade, replaced by something cold and hard. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment the old me, Kate Miller, the optimistic woman, the loving wife, and the hopeful mother-to-be, started to disappear. Someone new, stronger and ready to face everything, was slowly taking shape in the shadows of my own pain. Returning home after the accident felt like stepping into a completely different life. The quaint suburban house with its lush green lawn and the home sweet home doormat now gave off a cold and distant vibe. Ethan had set up the living room as a temporary bedroom for me since the doctors advised against too much movement. I walked into that room and realized everything familiar from our master bedroom had been moved down here, but it was all arranged so neatly, almost soullessly, like someone had simply completed a task. "I thought you'd be more comfortable here," Ethan said, but he still couldn't look me in the eye. His eyes always avoided mine, as if my face was something terrifying. I didn't blame him, even though his avoidance hurt more than the wounds on my skin. My mother-in-law Janet practically moved in with us. She showed up every day, bringing food and unsolicited advice. She cleaned the house, cooked meals, and managed my recovery schedule as if I were a child. At the first dinner after I came home, she quickly took control of everything. "Kate, you need to eat more to recover faster," she said, gently pushing a bowl of soup toward me. "Ethan needs you healthy, and his job also requires a positive image." I managed a weak smile. Since when did my health become part of Ethan's career strategy? But I remained silent, choosing peace over adding more tension. I felt the forced smile on my lips. Since when had my health become part of Ethan's career strategy? But I remained silent, choosing peace over adding more tension. One evening, while trying to find sleep in the cold room, I heard strange sounds from the kitchen. The dim light cast shadows, and Ethan's drunken voice echoed. "You don't get it, she looks terrifying." His voice cracked, mixed with a soft chuckle, like that movie character Two-Face, you know? I stood there, hiding behind the wall, my hands trembling. My heart felt like it was being squeezed. The man who once vowed to love and protect me was now turning my pain into a joke. The next day, when Ethan went to work, I quietly went upstairs. The master bedroom was still as perfect as it had been before the accident, as if nothing had ever happened. But something had changed. I searched everywhere but couldn't find my favorite art supplies. The wooden box with my name meticulously engraved on the lid, a gift from my grandmother. It held the brushes and paints I once used to create vibrant, lively paintings. Finally, I found it in the basement, buried under old Christmas decorations. The box was covered in dust, but when I opened it, everything inside remained intact. The brushes, tubes of oil paint, and clean canvases seemed to be waiting for me. I brought everything to the living room and started painting. For the first time in months, I felt life in my hands. Colors appeared on the canvas, not the bright tones of the past, but strong, dark shades. Red for anger, black for sorrow, and a touch of pale yellow, like the last glimmer of fading hope. Every brushstroke on the canvas brought forth the pain deep within me. The woman's face on the painting gradually emerged, half flawless, half distorted and cracked. That was me, or at least how I appeared in Ethan and Janet's eyes. The sound of keys turning in the door startled me. Ethan walked in, followed by his mother. They stood in the doorway, staring at my unfinished painting. "What are you doing?" Ethan asked, his voice filled with surprise and a hint of fear. "I'm painting," I replied, still gripping the brush. "This is how I heal." Janet stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "Kate, you should focus on your recovery. Is this really necessary?" I didn't answer, just looked at her. In my gaze, I knew she saw something had changed. I was no longer the gentle, obedient Kate I once was. In that small room, amidst the colors and unfinished strokes, I found myself again, discovered a new strength. The painting was not just art, it was my voice, my way of confronting the harsh reality and preparing for what was to come. The message came on a gloomy afternoon while I sat by the window, looking out at the empty yard. My phone screen blinked, a tiny blue light, but enough to pull me out of the void. "Are you Kate Miller?" "I am Maxim Cressy, the father of the man who caused the accident. I need to meet you." I read the message over and over, my fingers trembling as they slid across the screen. This man, the father of the person who crashed into my car, wanted to meet me? My rational mind warned me not to respond, that this might be just a late apology, or worse, a cruel joke. But my heart, the part that had been hurt to the core, urged me to seek answers. "Where and when?" I replied, knowing I might regret it. The cafe Maxim chose was on a corner of the old town, where red brick buildings and wooden windows created a warm space completely opposite to my cold world. I wrapped a scarf around part of my face, the newly healed skin still sensitive and fragile. Maxim stood up when I walked in, a middle-aged man with a tired face and eyes filled with sorrow. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice gentle but heavy with regret. "I don't have much time," I said down, clutching the hot coffee cup as if it were the only lifeline. "Say what you need to say." Maxim took a deep breath, his hands clasped tightly on the table. "My son, Jason, he wasn't alone in the car the night of the accident." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" "That night, Jason was with your husband's lover." Maxim hesitated, as if every word leaving his mouth was as heavy as a stone. He had drunk too much, but the woman was completely sober. When the accident happened, she left the scene before the police arrived. Everything around me suddenly blurred. My husband's lover? Who? I couldn't say the question aloud, just stared at Maxim, hoping he would continue. "My son told me they had been meeting at the Golden Leaf Hotel every Saturday night," Maxim continued. "That woman works at your husband's company, Griffin Marketing Associates." I felt my hand turn cold. The Golden Leaf. The place where Ethan had claimed he had client meetings every weekend. My heart pounded, each beat like a hammer against my chest. Maxim pulled a small envelope from his jacket, sliding it across the table. "These are copies of hotel receipts and some images from security cameras. I know this is harsh, but you deserve to know the truth." I opened the envelope, and the photos slipped from my hands like withered leaves falling onto the wooden table. In the blurry image from the camera, I saw Ethan, wearing his familiar gray suit, walking alongside a young woman. They entered the hotel lobby, laughing and talking naturally like a real couple. "One more thing." Maxim's voice pulled me back to reality. "Aiden orchestrated the accident. You know, his original intention was not to hurt you. I wasn't sure I could handle anymore. What are you saying? That woman. Her husband found out she was having an affair with a client of the company. Maxim hesitated, as if every word weighed heavily on him. Ethan hired Jason to follow and scare her, so she wouldn't reveal the relationship, but everything went wrong. That car was never meant to hit you. The truth crashed down on me like an icy storm. Ethan hadn't just betrayed me. He had directly caused the accident that took my child, my face, and my former life. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice catching in my throat. Maxim looked straight into my eyes, his gaze clouded with pain and regret. Because I can't stand seeing my son used as a tool in such a cruel game, and because you deserve the truth. I didn't respond, just sat there, the coffee in my cup long gone cold. My heart felt frozen, but somewhere inside a small flame began to burn. A flame of truth, of justice, and of I sat across from Maxim Cressy in a small corner cafe, where the dim light from old ceiling lamps made the space feel detached from the outside world. He looked at me with a sincere gaze, yet his eyes were heavy with pain and remorse. In front of me lay a folder, filled with documents and photos of the country's top cosmetic surgeon. Kate, I know things have gotten worse than anyone could imagine, Maxim said, his voice low but full of determination. I can't undo what my son has done, but I can help you start over. I am willing to cover all the costs of cosmetic surgery so you can have a new life. I remained silent, my fingers unconsciously touching the edge of my scarf, feeling the soft fabric covering the scars on my face. Since the accident, I had almost completely avoided looking in the mirror. Curious glances, pitiful looks, or worse, the whispers behind my back made me withdraw, like an empty shell. You want me to become someone else? I asked, my voice hoarse. I've lost everything. This face, my child, my entire life has been taken away. Maxim nodded, understanding evident on his face. Yes, but not to hide. To give you a new opportunity, a new identity, a life where you are in control. I leaned back in my chair, feeling as if the whole world was weighing down on my shoulders. A new identity, a new face. The idea was both terrifying and tempting. If I was no longer Kate Miller, could I escape this painful past? What is your plan? I asked, my eyes never leaving his. Maxim opened the folder, turning to a page with a photo of a well-known surgeon. This is Dr. James Harper. He specializes in reconstructive and cosmetic surgery. We can create a completely new appearance for you. Not just to fade the scars, but to make you someone else. Someone no one will recognize. I focused on the before and after photos of Dr. Harper's patients. The transformations were truly remarkable, as if they had stepped out of their old lives and embraced a new identity. If I agree, who will I become? I asked softly, my voice barely breaking the silence. Maxim smiled gently, as if he had been waiting for this question. We will create a new name, a new life. I was thinking of the name Michael Cressy. You will be my niece, just returning from Europe after years abroad. This will explain all the differences and help you blend in more easily. Michael Cressy. The name felt strange but offered a glimmer of hope. No longer Kate Miller, the woman betrayed by her husband and who had lost everything. I would become someone different, stronger, more assertive. I agree, I said, feeling a new surge of strength within me. Make me Michael Cressy. In the following weeks, I prepared for the surgery. Maxim arranged everything from medical examinations to psychological counseling. Each meeting with Dr. Harper brought me closer to a new chapter in my life. He showed me digital simulations of my new appearance, every feature carefully crafted yet retaining natural characteristics. We are not turning you into someone completely different, Dr. Harper said during the final consultation. The goal is to help you feel comfortable and confident so you can look in the mirror and see yourself, a better version of yourself. On the day of the surgery, Maxim took me to Dr. Harper's private clinic. The tall building with its sleek glass facade stood as a symbol of renewal. I walked into the operating room, lay down on the pristine white bed, and closed my eyes. Everything is ready. The doctor's voice was calm. When you wake up, everything will be different. I clenched my hand, the coldness of the anesthesia slowly spreading through my body. In the final moments before drifting into a deep sleep, I thought of only one thing: Michael Cressy. I would become Michael Cressy. Everything slowly faded away, the operating room lights blurring in my closing eyes. I let go of Kate Miller, ready for the journey to become someone new, with a plan far greater than just changing my appearance. I stood in front of my old house, under the gray sky and cold winds seeping through my thick coat. The iron gate still creaked every time it opened, and the tulips I once planted had been replaced by lifeless decorative shrubs. Everything looked the same, but I knew well that behind those walls, everything had completely changed. The old key still fit perfectly in the lock. I turned it gently and the door opened with a soft creak. Inside, the warm yellow light glowed from the kitchen, and soft laughter echoed. I stepped in, my high heels tapping lightly on the wooden floor, each step marking my return. A familiar voice came from the dining room. The lawyer said if she doesn't respond soon, we can proceed with the annulment. Janet's sweet but calculating voice spoke. Honestly, it would be a relief, Ethan. That accident was truly an opportunity for you to start over. Ethan didn't respond immediately. I could imagine him sitting there, his head bowed, swirling his wine glass as usual. I just want everything to be over. I'm tired of pretending to care about her. I walked into the dining room and they both immediately turned to look at me. Janet set her glass down on the table, her eyes wide, a mix of shock and caution. Ethan froze, his mouth slightly open, unable to say a word. "Hello," I said, my voice calm and cold. "Sorry for dropping by unannounced." Ethan stood up, his green eyes blinking rapidly as if trying to figure out who I was. Who are you? How did you get into my house?" I smiled, placing my handbag on the table, gently but firmly. "Your house." "Ethan, I thought you knew whose house this really is." Janet tried to regain her composure. "What do you want? If this is about the property, we have a lawyer." "I am not here for the property," I interrupted. "I'm here for the truth, to expose what you've been hiding all this time." Ethan's face turned pale, the wine glass in his hand trembling. "What are you talking about? We don't know who you are." "I am Kate Miller," I said, each word slowly carving into the silent space. "Or at least, I used to be Kate Miller. But thanks to you, I became someone else. Someone you can no longer touch." Janet shook her head, her lips pressed tightly together. "Kate, she's gone. We received the paperwork from the hospital. She was never coming back." "Yes, that's what you wanted to believe." I took a step forward, letting the light fully illuminate my new face. "But I am here, in flesh and blood, and I brought all the evidence to reveal the truth." I pulled a folder from my bag and threw it on the table. Photos, hotel receipts, and a recording of Ethan's conversation with Jason, the driver in the accident. Ethan's voice was clear in the recording. "Follow her, scare her, but don't actually cause an accident." Janet's mouth dropped open, her hands trembling as she picked up the photos. "Ethan, what have you done?" Ethan backed away, his back hitting the wall. "No, it's not like that. It was just a misunderstanding. Everything was an accident." "Really?" I let out a cold laugh. "And what about the other women? The ones you deceived, threatened, and turned into prey in your twisted game?" Ethan's face shifted from pale to a bright red. "You're lying. No one will believe you." "Then let the law decide," I replied, eerily calm. "Those women are ready to speak up, and I have all the evidence. Sign these divorce papers, or I will let the world know who you truly are." Janet turned to her son, her eyes filled with fear. "Ethan, you should do what she says." Ethan stared at me, and then his eyes dropped to the divorce papers on the table. His hands shook as he picked up the pen, his handwriting shaky as he signed the document. When he set the pen down, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. "I will leave," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "But don't think I've disappeared. The darkness of what you've done will remain here, and it will grow every day." I turned around and walked out of the house that had once been my home. The cold wind lashed against my face, but I felt light. This confrontation not only brought justice to me, but also to all those who had endured similar pain. I had returned, not as the weak Kate Miller of the past, but as a strong and fearless Michael Cressy. Soft yellow light bathed the white walls of the art gallery, creating a space both elegant and mysterious. The whispers of the crowd blended with the gentle music, like a thin veil concealing the secrets waiting to be revealed. I stood in the corner of the room, wearing a simple but elegant black dress, my new face completely different under the new name, Mia Cressy. On the walls, my paintings stretched from one end of the room to the other, each telling its own story. Some featured faces with two different halves, one bright and vibrant, the other dark and shadowed. There were hands reaching out from the darkness, eyes that seemed to speak truths someone had tried to hide. Attendees paused in front of each painting, leaning in close, whispering to one another about the deeper meaning behind every brushstroke. "Are you the artist behind these works?" A middle-aged man with sharp eyes approached me. "Yes, I'm Mia," I replied, offering a gentle smile. "Can you share more about your inspiration? These paintings, they feel very personal." I looked up at the largest painting in the center of the gallery. It was a portrait of a woman with a cracked face, yet her eyes still shone with light. They're stories of betrayal and rebirth. When someone tries to erase your identity, but you find yourself in those broken pieces. The man nodded, his admiration growing. I knew he couldn't recognize me. No one here could. But there was one person I knew would, and right at that moment, I saw Ethan. He stood on the other side of the room, staring at the painting titled "Saturday Night at the Golden Leaf." A piece depicting a man in a suit, standing under the dim lights of a hotel lobby, his face only half visible, the rest swallowed by shadows. Surrounding him were faint silhouettes of women, like nameless ghosts. Ethan was stunned, the wine glass in his hand tilted, a few drops of red wine falling to the floor without him noticing. I could see every muscle in his face tense, his eyes wide with disbelief at what he was seeing. "How powerful!" Another voice rang out, drawing the crowd's attention toward me and Ethan. It was Audrey, one of his victims. She wore a graceful green dress, her expression calm, but her eyes shone with strength. "These paintings aren't just art. They are evidence." The crowd began to murmur, curious and skeptical gazes now fixed on us. Ethan took a step back, his face shifting from shock to panic. "What are you talking about?" His voice wavered, as if he could no longer recognize the sound coming from his own mouth. "I'm talking about the truth, Ethan," Audrey continued, her voice unwavering. "About what you did to me, to the other women, about the false promises, the mind games, and the threats. It's all here." She held up a picture of text messages from him. Sweet promises followed by cold words when things no longer went his way. Others began to step forward, one by one. They were familiar faces from my past, from Kate Miller's life. There were also those I had never met, but their stories all shared one common thread. Ethan Griffin. "I am one of them too," another woman spoke up. "He threatened me when I wanted to leave. He said he would ruin my life, and he nearly did." Ethan shook his head, raising his hands as if to hold back the avalanche of accusations pouring toward him. "No! You're all making this up. This is a trap." "A trap?" I stepped forward, my gaze never leaving him. "Ethan, no one trapped you. You walked into this yourself. Every painting, every story here is the truth. And now, you can't run away anymore." The crowd parted, allowing me to get closer to him. Janet, Ethan's mother, appeared from somewhere in the room, her face pale, eyes wide with horror. "Ethan, is it true? Did you do all of this?" "No, Mom, they're lying," Ethan shouted, his voice breaking, his confidence completely shattered. I looked at him, my heart devoid of any sympathy. "Ethan, you can no longer control or manipulate anyone. It's time for the truth to speak." Gallery security approached, not to stop me, but to maintain order. Camera flashes from phones lit up, capturing every moment of this confrontation. I knew this moment would mark the end of Ethan Griffin, and the beginning of a new chapter for me. Mia Cressy, the woman who had risen from the ruins of the past. I sat on the small wooden chair in my new apartment, the morning sunlight filtering through the window, casting warm golden rays on the floor. The old radio continued to play soft classical music, bringing a sense of peace I once thought I'd never find again. In front of me, the small dining table was covered with a crisp white cloth, a vase of pale blue hydrangeas beside it, my favorite flower. I took a sip of tea, feeling the warmth spread through my body. Since moving to this small coastal town, I had started to get used to my new life under my real name, Bianca Claire Griffin. No more hiding, no more living in the shadows of the past. The old name, Kate Miller, was just a part of my memory, a closed chapter in the book of my life. News of Ethan Griffin's trial had been broadcast on every media channel. The man who once stood at the peak of power and fame now had to face serious accusations. Other victims had also spoken up, not only about the lies and deception, but also about the manipulative threats and psychological abuse he had caused. Ethan was convicted of multiple charges, and his punishment was not only the years he would spend behind bars, but also the loss of trust from those who had once loved him. I was not present at the trial that day. There was no need. I had chosen to distance myself from all the noise and chaos, choosing a path of peace. My heart had no more space for resentment, only a sense of relief and tranquility. Every morning, waking up in this cozy little apartment, I felt like I was being reborn, like a late-blooming flower still glowing under the sun. Colton appeared at the door, holding a bouquet of colorful wildflowers. "Good morning, Bianca," he said, his warm, deep voice always bringing me a sense of safety. "Much better now that you're here," I replied, a smile spreading across my face. Colton had been by my side throughout my recovery, from those early days of adjusting to my new appearance, to when I finally felt confident enough to step into the world under my real name. He placed the flowers on the table and gently sat down next to me. "I just heard the news. They sentenced Ethan." I nodded, my fingers gently turning the porcelain cup in my hands. "I know, but for me, it ended a long time ago. Today's verdict is just a formality." Colton remained silent, his deep green eyes seeming to read my thoughts. "Are you really okay?" "More than ever," I answered honestly. "I can finally live my own life, without looking back anymore." We sat together, quietly watching the sunlight dance through the leaves outside the window. With Colton, I didn't need to hide anything. He knew all about my past, the scars, the sleepless nights, and even the silent tears I shed when I thought about the child I never got to hold. But he never judged or pitied me. Colton simply stayed, listening and offering his genuine love. "Do you want to go to the beach?" Colton asked, his eyes filled with gentle warmth. "I heard the waves are beautiful today." "I'd love to," I replied, feeling joy bloom in my chest. "Let me grab my coat." We stepped outside together, where the fresh air carried the salty scent of the ocean. The soft sand stretched along the shore, gentle waves lapping at the beach, creating a soothing melody like nature's lullaby. I took off my shoes, letting my bare feet sink into the sand, feeling its softness and warmth. Colton took my hand, our fingers intertwined, steady and serene. Under the sunlight, everything seemed clearer, and I knew I had truly moved past the dark days. I turned to look at Colton, my heart brimming with hope. "I think we can start over from here." "I'm always ready," Colton said, his kind smile a promise unspoken. With his hand in mine, I moved forward, leaving behind all the pain and betrayal. Ahead of me was the vast blue ocean and an open sky. A new chapter had begun, and this time, I knew I would write my own story, with all the love and strength I possessed. Bianca Claire Griffin's story is not only a journey through pain and betrayal, but also a testament to inner strength and the power of rebirth. In real life, each of us may face challenges and losses that seem insurmountable, but just like Bianca, if we dare to face the truth, let go of the past and boldly move forward, the light of peace and new happiness will always await us. True peace comes from loving yourself and choosing the path that is truly yours. What do you think of Bianca Claire Griffin's journey and the decisions she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more captivating stories about life and family.